Alright guys, I'm Alan Forrest Smith from Master and Man. I'm really grateful you took the time to come and listen to me ramble on a little bit. And tonight, we're making this a weekly thing. This is the second one we've done, and this week we're talking about biographies. Now, as a writer, an author myself, I've done a little bit of work in biographies. I haven't done a huge amount, but I've done quite a bit of work in my own biography. But I wanted to start with this. I'm a huge fan of biographies, I always have been. And regardless of the thickness of the book or the size of the book, I generally will read it. Writers' biographies I love. My most favourite ever was the Tolstoy biography. I completely loved it because I'm a huge fan of Tolstoy also. But for me, what's always interesting is, it doesn't really matter what size the book is. If it's a good biography, I will read it. Now, here's what's interesting. I've got loads of books this kind of size, which are biographies. And actually, I've read this one 3 times. So, this is a Tolstoy biography. I completely loved it. From the minute I opened it, right to the end, I was completely sucked in. Absolutely, totally absorbed. The same as some other ones behind me. Off the top of my head, the Einstein biography, I loved it. And a few others anyway, it doesn't really matter, but this particular one, I thought I was going to love it, James Joyce. And I could not, for the life of me, read this book. I tried, I went from chapter to chapter, I jumped back into, and I just couldn't read it. So I've had this book maybe 8-9 years or something like that, and as you can see, the pages have never even been turned. So there's 2 different types of biographies, isn't there, really, for us as writers. One, as a writer, we could be writing somebody else's biography, or we could be writing our own biography as well. So, obviously, in this little chat, I can't cover everything. It's not really possible, because there's so much work goes into a biography. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about a few essentials, really, that I think you should know if you're thinking of writing a biography. So I'm looking at the other cameras also. Writing a biography. How I would start something like a biography is, initially, what is the purpose of the book? Now, I remember years and years ago, maybe, well, not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, I worked on a mentor program with a woman from Israel, and she was living in America, and she was 84 and she'd survived the Holocaust. And she was writing a biography that she wanted to put details about the Holocaust. But it wasn't a miserable biography. It was about her life, how it had progressed in America, how it expanded, how she'd survived and other people had survived. And it was just a wonderful read. But when I said to her, what's the purpose of that biography? She said to me something like, I can't remember exact words, something along the lines of, well, I want other people to feel that regardless of what you go through, everything is possible. So the question is, what is the purpose of your biography if you're thinking of writing a biography? You have to start with a reason in mind of why you're writing it. So I've been writing kind of a secret biography for quite a long time, really. Just pages and chapters of books. And I kind of see it almost like as a legacy biography. And really for my children. And I actually got the idea from Charles Dickens. And Charles Dickens wrote a small biography that was just for his 4 children. I've got 5 children, and I want to write this biography for my 5 kids. So that hopefully they'll see a little bit more of what was going on in the background that we never really get the chance to speak about. And of course the lessons as well. Which takes us on to the second point, who will be reading this biography? You have to know who will be reading it, because if you don't know who's reading it, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to write. So for example, if you're writing it for your family and children, there may be things you want to exclude and include within that biography. So if you're writing it for the whole public generally, or you're just writing it for you, if you're writing it for yourself, you may want to put everything in there. Every happy and gory detail you may want to put within that book. But it's a good question to ask. Who is going to be reading this book? Who will be reading my or your biography? A third thing you should be really asking is, what's really interesting about this story, this book? I mean, a biography is a story, right? That's exactly what it is. I strongly believe that our life is like a book, and the way we live our life is like filling chapters all the time. So we are living history right now, but we've left history behind us as we've been walking through life. So we have to ask ourselves, is it an interesting read? And if it's an interesting read, why is it an interesting read? And if it's not an interesting read, how can we make it interesting? So, in life, there may be things that we've done that we don't feel great about. Or there may be things in life that we've done that are just amazing. We may not want to speak about those things, but other people may think, oh my God, that was so interesting, I didn't know that. For instance, I've read a lot of Tolstoy stuff, well, most of his books. And when I read his biography, there were so many small stories I didn't know. So, for example, there was a woman he used to dream about the whole of his life. And he always saw her. He always saw her as a young woman. And it was a slave girl he'd arranged to meet in the forest behind his house that he wanted to have an affair with. But he never told anyone about this. And it only came out in his biography. And lots of other small things that came out in the biography. So you have to ask yourself, hi Peter, I've just seen Peter arrive. You have to ask yourself, what and why is it really interesting? And of course that takes us to the next point about the stories. Stories come in all shapes and sizes, and some stories can last for months, and some stories can last just one moment in a day. But the story of the last one, for example, when I was young, when I was a teenager, I was 18, I actually saved a man's life. I saved a man from drowning on a beach. And what it was, I was sitting on the beach and I could see this guy's back bobbing up and down in the water. And I heard a child shouting, Dad, Dad. And I was just sitting on the beach was packed, and it looked like only I noticed there's somebody's back. So I dove in the water, which was quite shallow, so I nearly broke my neck, swimming through the sand first and then through the water, until I eventually reached this guy, flipped him over, and he was grey and he'd obviously had drowned. A lilo came over, a pedalo came over, I got on the pedalo, pulled him up and gave him the kiss of life, and he came back to life. Now, that was a tiny story that lasted, God knows, 5 minutes at the most. But it's a story I've told quite a few times in my life. And maybe that guy's still alive now. I don't know. He was certainly alive on the day because he was on the beach talking before the ambulance came for him. But then you can have another story which may last years within your life. So you've got to ask yourself, when you do a biography, where is the beginning of this biography? Is it, let me talk about myself, is it, I was born originally in Edinburgh in 1963, February the 9th. At 15 Hope Terrace. Does a biography start at the beginning? Are you going to start it when you emigrate to a different country? Are you going to start it when you began that job? Are you going to start the biography when you change your career? Are you going to start the biography at your first divorce and at the beginning of your 8th marriage? I don't know. But there has to be a start point for the biography. And this is where the stories will begin. And of course there has to be an end point also. Because some people do release multiple biographies, as we all know and as we've all seen. So we have to choose stories that are stories worth telling. Look, some stories, I had to review a biography a while ago. And to be quite honest with you, I told the client as well, I thought it was boring. I thought it was uninteresting, and he just talked about events in this person's life. And I said to this lady, I said, look, I love the story, I love the book, but the stories are just so dull. There's no conflict, there's no happiness, there's no energy, there's no anything going on. But actually, the stories in themselves were good stories. They'd just been badly told by the person who'd written the biography for her. So she's working on this new biography now. So the stories have to have something to them, or otherwise don't tell them. And the stories from the beginning to the end of the biography, they have to have a coherent flow. So the coherent flow could be that, you are a Polish immigrant living in Scotland, and it could be the whole experience through all that thing. It could be some other major transformation, or it could be just family life. It could be a religious experience, whatever it is. The stories have to have coherence from start to finish. The next point you should think about is, and guys, we can't cover everything. I mean, we're talking about a 2-week seminar talking about biographies here, so I'm just hitting you with a load of ideas to get you thinking, to get your brains flowing and everything else. And don't forget, keep your questions till the end. In your biography, be honest and truthful. It's essential. If you tell a lie and somebody reads it, somebody will say, it didn't quite happen like that. Or you may be, especially with the web now, you may be easily found out that you were saying one thing. I was a super successful, put it this way, I had a band when I was a teenager, a long, long time ago. I was 16 when we started this band, and we had one session on the John Peel show on Radio 1. Now, I can say to people, yeah, we had a great band, we did really well. I was on BBC, I was on Radio 1. It was going to be massive. But the fact is, nobody had even heard of us. That's the fact. So you have to tell the truth because people will find out. So be truthful, be honest, and pack it with personality. The next thing you should do is try and give every story or every chapter a life lesson. Why would you do that? Because there's no point telling a story if somebody's not going to learn from that story. Even if it's just interesting or funny, the listener or reader will still learn something. So what we need to ask ourselves is, what's the moral of the story? You can tell the story of how you lost everything at one stage in your life. But what's the moral of that story? What did you learn from losing everything? How did you gain everything after that? What's the moral of the story? If your kids or your family or your friends or anybody's reading that book, there has to be a reason to read the book. So you give them a moral at the end of every story. So pack it with life lessons. And of course, a memoir or a biography isn't just about you and me. We could be talking about other characters we meet in our life. For example, the very first job I had when I left school, I was a landscape gardener. And many times I've told this story where I refer to a guy called Norman Ball. And Norman Ball was a real Manchester scally. And at the time I thought he was really, really old. He was 31 and I was 16. And he introduced me to music and lots of life ideas. Very rough, a little bit wild. He used to tell me things I'd never even heard of. So some stuff quite shocking as a working class guy, sitting in the back of a van during lunchtime. But I've talked about this guy before. But if Norman ever read my book and I'd written a load of rubbish about Norman, he'd go, what the hell's this? And he could sue me for writing a load of nonsense about him. So when we build our portfolio of individuals that we're going to put within our biography, we have to find out the facts. We have to find out the real things. And look, we can have a little bit of artistic discretion when we create the story, but it has to be based around facts. So we have to find our individual people or characters we're going to add into the story. Next lesson is pivotal moments or events in your life. I wrote a book called, my very first published book is called Escape from Humanity. And the book really is, it's a little bit biographical, but there's pivotal moments in there, like when I went through a very dramatic divorce, when I lost my home, when I became homeless for a while, and lots of other crazy stuff that can happen in those times. But these are what you call pivotal moments when everything turned and changed and went in a different direction. Do you have pivotal moments that happened to you? It was like, bam. It was a moment in time that changed everything for you, changed everything for those around you, changed everything for your family. My parents ran away from Edinburgh overnight and drove down to England, and my dad got a new job. to escape debt and poverty. That was a pivotal moment in my 7-year-old life, but an even more pivotal moment in my mum and dad's life, because they went from poverty to having their own house and proper jobs. So these are pivotal moments. Having a child is a pivotal moment. Having a heart attack is a pivotal moment. Living during this pandemic is a pivotal moment for a lot of people. Find out the pivotal moments, because people love to read that kind of stuff. Point number 10 is ask yourself, after you've written out your draft and your ideas, ask yourself this question, and it's a tough question to ask yourself. Would you read this book, and why? Is it good enough for you to read? I've been writing for years. I don't actually like to read my own stuff. I like to edit, get the book done, get it published. I've got 20 books now, get the whole thing published, and just start writing the next book. It's very unusual if I read my own books. I only read them in the edit. But you have to ask yourself during the edit, oh my God, is this book any good or is it terrible? Sometimes you just don't know. Actually, what I do is I have a group of close friends to give me their honest opinion. So I'll send the book out and I'll say to them, look, I want you to tell me how good or bad this book is. Just tell me what you think. Of course, everybody always says they're brilliant. But if somebody comes back with something bad, or I see something that I'm not quite happy with, I have to ask myself the question, how does the reader read that same thing? Because if I don't like it, he or she probably won't like it either. And finally, guys, before we come to any questions, if you have any, so we have, photos, maps, illustrations, enhancers, anything you're going to put together in that book. You may actually, when I saw my parents the last time, which was, my parents are in their 80s and I haven't seen them for about 13 weeks now. My father brought out a box I'd never seen before, and it was actually it was photographs of my father. Sorry, my father's father as a small child with his father and grandfather. I'd never seen those photographs before. And some other photographs of my dad as a small child with his... Actually, my father never actually grew up with his parents. They ran off and left him. And they left my father with his grandparents. But there's pictures of my father I'd never seen before. Birth certificates I'd never seen before. All these different connections I'd never seen before. And I thought to myself at that moment, if I ever write a big biography, this is just the most perfect material. So guys, we went through 10 things there, short, fast, to the point. The purpose of the book is reading the book, what's really interesting about the book, the stories, the coherence, be honest and truthful, the life lessons, the characters, the individuals in the pivotal moments, of course. And ask yourself, would you read that book? And that's it, guys. If you have any questions, I'll open up the chat box right now, and I'll let all of you have some. Let me.
Chat should be open anyway.
The chat. I'm looking for. Here we go. So, guys, if you have anything to ask, just pop it in the chat box right now, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So, guys, any questions you have on anything to do with the writing, whether it be a book, whether it be writing a book, idea, okay, fire away from Laura. Go on, Laura, fire away. I'm waiting for it. Guys, this is a really good opportunity to ask a question while you're here. I've been a writer for a long, long time now. Okay. It's easy for me to do it by video. Okay, let's do the video. Let's have a quick look.
Unmute.
Yeah, I'd have to do it this way, I think. Ask to unmute. Ask to start a video. Ask to unmute. Just one sec, Laura. There you go. Okay, fire away.
Okay, so I've been thinking about writing this for a long, long time because of quite a lot of turbulent times and especially in relationships and stuff. And I'm actually a therapist myself, so I'm a qualified therapist, and so I want to write a book because it's always good to write a book when you're doing that sort of thing. But the thing is, do I change people's names? Because what I don't want to be doing is writing about these pivotal times and putting somebody's actual name in there, because some of them, I don't think they really want me telling the world about some of this stuff.
Yeah, sure,
so
yeah.
Can I change names?
You can, yeah. Sorry, just finish, Laura. Go on.
I was just going to say, and also I was going to do it under, you know how sometimes you can do it under like a different name?
Yeah.
So that it's biography and I can really put it out there, but I'm not me.
Yeah, of course you can. You can do that, yeah. I mean, so for example, do we have the accidental copyright book there?
There.
Oh. So for example, because I write I write a lot of different stuff, including business books. So this is a book here I've just finished. We just finished this, just published it. It's about 300 pages. Now, obviously, it's a business book and it reveals business strategies, etc., etc. I haven't really named any clients in that book, but I've told the stories. But what I've done is I've told the story of what took place, but I've replaced some situations that I know will work exactly the same. I've replaced some scenarios, so it's told more like a story based on fact. So that's how I do it when I write certain things. So otherwise, it's too big a legal route as well, actually, because some people don't want to be in your book. I mean, for example, if you're going to put somebody in your book, you really need to have written and signed approval.
Yeah. I don't think some of the people that have done whatever they've done are going to give me approval to write about what they've done.
Yeah, yeah. So what you can do is you can make sure the reader knows that it's a story based on a scenario or a fact. That's how you would do it.
Okay. And what about writing under a different name? Because I know that you can do that too.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can do it. I mean, I don't do that. I mean, but I know people who do that. But there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You can do that. Yeah.
Okay. That all was. I mean, it was very, very valuable. Everything you said, because I wouldn't have thought about a lot of those things, and I thought a lot. I'm a big thinker, and I wouldn't have thought about some of the things that you brought up, like what is the purpose of it and stuff. So really valuable stuff. Thank you.
Good stuff. Okay. I'm just going to ask the other guys if they have any questions. I'll have to look at the chat box though.
Okay.
Guys, any more questions, please? Oh, look. How do you stop a biography just becoming a story? Well, look, the truth is, Luke, that'll only happen as you map the whole book out. So, let me just read that question again. How do you stop a biography just becoming a story? Do you mean a story from start to finish, or do you mean just like a bit of a dull story? Is that what you mean? I'll just answer it anyway how I think until you type, because we only have 40 minutes on it, so we're running out of time. Look, it goes back to a lot of the points that we brought. Yeah, just the dull story part. Okay, just the dull story part. Well, obviously there's an art to writing a story, and some stories are incredibly dull. I mean, we buy a lot of books in our house. We read a lot of books. And I bought a book that was a Booker Prize winner. And when I opened the book up, it started so brilliant. It was this Asian woman wrote about her father. I forgot the name of the book now. It's down there somewhere.
You'll run out of time.
Running out. Oh, we're really running out of time. But so I bought the book based on the first line of this book. And I don't normally buy it, but I'll be really honest. I don't pay full price for a book. I buy it on eBay. I try and buy it cheap. And like reuse a book instead of buying new. So when I bought this book, it was terrible. It was just a boring, dull story that went on and on. I couldn't believe it had won this prize. So you have to just make sure the story is interesting. Just remember, from the day that we are born, we are told stories. So stories are almost part of our DNA, which means everybody wants to hear a story. Now, if you're at work tomorrow, or you're on the tram, or you're on the metro, or you're wherever, people love to hear stories. So a dull story is only a dull story if it's dull. So really that's where we sometimes have to work on our writing skills and ask ourselves the question, if it's dull, why is it dull? Because actually, if it's just incredibly dull and there's nothing to say, leave it out of the biography, just don't put it in there. But if it just sounds dull because of the way it's being written, that means you can dress the paragraph to make it sound amazing. So you can have something like, you know, at the age of 9 months, my father was left with his granny. That's the story. Or you can have something like, so at the age of 9 months, in one of the coldest winters ever recorded in Edinburgh, my father's grandmother had a knock on the door. When she opened the door, my father was lying as a 9-month-old baby in a box on a freezing cold doorstep. She picked up the box and she realised the baby was from her daughter, who'd ran away, this is true actually, who'd run away to join the circus. So the story starts to become interesting. We start to flesh the story out, build it up. Why was he left? Why did the granny keep this, her grandchild? Why did she run away with the circus? Where was her father? So there's all different parts of this start to come in. You can have conflict, love, etc, etc, etc. All those emotional roller coasters start to build up and take place within the story. So a long way around, I know, Luke, so forgive me for that, but you just have to keep the story interesting, that's all. Okay, should you plan it or just write? Okay.
Do you just write? Do you just kind of do it from your head?
I do it two ways. Sometimes I just write. But I can tell you now, when I just write, it's usually a mistake because I have to rewrite it all. So what I do is I plan it on paper in a book first. Now, just so you know, I'm not a great pen and paper writer, but I have tons of journals in the house that are all kind of all over the place, and I try and flesh out each chapter idea, which means just a chapter heading and just a few other bits on one page. They get a page each, and then I'll leave it by the side of the bed and maybe spend a week on it. And then maybe a few weeks later, and that's me planning it out. Then maybe a few weeks later, I will then transfer the notes into my pages on my Mac, and then start to flesh out those notes, delete some bits, and then when I've done that, I'll just write everything. And generally...
Okay, so you do little stories and then you put it all together in order at the end.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. That's how I do it, yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Everybody does it different. Everybody writes different. The first book I wrote, Escape from Humanity, I wrote it from start to finish without stopping. When the publisher said they wanted it, they said, well, where's the chapters, where's the start, where's the finish? And I had to rewrite the whole thing. I actually deleted the original document and rewrote it, so it's better to plan it. That's the answer, yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys. One final question from anyone before I go, and then we have to close because the timer's popping up now. That's it, guys. So listen, don't forget, every Tuesday, 7:30, we're doing these writers and authors sessions. It'll be a different one next week. Of course, you have to be on the email list, but you know, it'd be really nice of you who've seen this to just pop something on the Mastermind Facebook page or the Instagram and just say, I was on the call tonight, really enjoyed it, or I watched Alan tonight, he has no idea what he's talking about. Something like that. So thanks, guys. We will see you next week, I hope. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. I really appreciate you. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Wicked, thanks.
That was so good. Oops.
And share to IGTV.
Switch it off.
Yeah, I can edit that one though, so it's time to